I thought I was just learning to dance for my girlfriend's birthday, until her sister leaned in during practice and whispered, almost daring me, "Your dance teacher doesn't touch you like this." That's the night everything changed. The story opens with the male narrator, 24, self-aware yet slightly shy, arriving at Elena's private dance studio for what he assumes will be a routine favor, learning a few ballroom steps to surprise his girlfriend at her upcoming birthday party. The studio setting is described almost as a character itself. The wooden floorboards gleam faintly under the evening light, carrying the subtle scent of polish and cedar. A vintage wall clock ticks softly, its steady rhythm hinting at the tempo they'll soon follow. In one corner, a small Bluetooth speaker hums with low-volume jazz, filling the room with a gentle, mellow warmth. Outside the tall windows, the last stretch of daylight spills through sheer curtains, brushing the space with a gold-tinged calm. Elena, his girlfriend's older sister, steps out from the mirrored wall as if she had been part of the reflection. She's in her early 40s, poised and self-assured in a fitted black practice top and soft-soled dance shoes. Her hair is tied back loosely, a few wisps framing her face in a way that looks unstudied but elegant. The narrator immediately notices how different her energy feels compared to what he had pictured, not strict or overly formal, but centered, collected, someone used to guiding without rushing. When she greets him, her voice is low and even, carrying the calm authority of someone who knows both the dance floor and her own presence. The first few steps are awkward. He's self-conscious about his height and the clumsiness in his limbs, yet Elena doesn't correct him sharply. Instead, she steps closer, not invading his space but easing into it until he can sense the steady rhythm of her breath. She demonstrates the basic frame. Her right hand settles lightly on his shoulder blade, fingertips warm against the fabric of his shirt. She instructs him to keep his palm open and supportive at her mid-back, guiding him to feel the weight and direction of the lead. Their steps are small at first, almost tentative, shifting from heel to toe in slow time with the muted swing of the music. What surprises him most is that her touch feels precise yet strangely human, not mechanical like a coach's adjustment, but with a warmth that lingers even after she lets go. He catches himself noticing the faint citrus scent of her hand lotion when she corrects the angle of his elbow. A moment of near silence arises when the music pauses between tracks. The clock's ticking grows louder. They both glance at the speaker as if reluctant to break the quiet. He senses something unspoken, but the next song begins and they resume. Throughout the lesson, Elena never makes him feel judged. Instead, her encouragement is understated but reassuring. A brief nod when he remembers a step, a small smile when he steadies his frame. These small gestures, delivered with restraint, begin to dissolve his nervousness. The scene closes with the narrator leaving the studio after the session. As he steps outside into the cool evening air, he realizes his chest still remembers the faint weight of her hand on his back. In his voiceover reflection, he admits he signed up for these lessons to impress his girlfriend. Yet he can't shake the feeling that something about Elena's presence lingers, like an echo of the music still playing in his head. The second lesson begins on a day when the weather itself feels like part of the story. A soft rain has been falling since morning, leaving the streets slick and glistening under muted city lights. The narrator arrives at Elena's studio just as the clouds grow heavier, the sound of rain tapping gently against the tall window panes becoming the quiet metronome of the evening. Inside, the studio is warmer than he remembers, its wooden floors carrying a faint trace of the polish from the night before, and the air laced with a mild citrus-clean scent. The low jazz from the speaker returns, but this time it's more of a mellow blues rhythm, slower and softer, almost blending with the rain. Elena is barefoot today, having set aside her dance shoes to demonstrate smoother footwork. Her bare soles slide soundlessly across the varnished wood, her steps fluid, her posture relaxed yet controlled. The narrator notices this small change immediately, how it makes her movements seem less formal, more intimate, like a glimpse into her private self rather than just her professional side. The narrator, still a little self-conscious from the first lesson, attempts the sequence but quickly stumbles over his own step. Instead of a sharp correction, Elena lets out a soft, genuine laugh that fills the quiet space between them. She steadies him instinctively, her fingers wrapping lightly around his forearm, just enough to catch his balance. For a brief second, the warmth of her touch lingers through the sleeve of his shirt, and he feels unexpectedly grounded, as though the rain and the world outside have momentarily fallen away. There's a subtle shift in the air as they continue. Their movements become a little more in sync, their bodies finding the rhythm together in small increments. The mirror on the far wall reflects not just two people practicing steps, but the gradual softening of distance between them, something wordless growing in the pauses between the beats. When the rain intensifies, Elena suggests a short break. She pours 2 cups of steaming chamomile tea from a small thermos she keeps by the sound system. They sit near the window ledge, their cups cradled in their hands, steam drifting into the cool air that leaks in through a barely opened pane. The soft clinking of ceramic against wood punctuates their conversation. Their talk begins with music, the song she loved as a student dancer, and slowly drifts into memories of her younger years in competition circuits, the long rehearsals, and the sacrifices that led her to give up certain dreams. Her voice, usually steady, carries a thread of wistfulness when she admits she sometimes wonders if she stopped dancing for herself too soon. The narrator listens quietly, noticing how her expression softens when she looks out at the rain, as if she's seeing her past in the blurred reflections of the streetlights. Something in her confession feels rare, like a private side she doesn't often reveal. As the lesson resumes, he feels more at ease. His steps improve, though he's certain it isn't only technique. There's something about sharing a personal story that has made their movements more attuned, the rhythm more natural. By the end of the session, the rain has slowed to a drizzle. He thanks her before stepping out into the damp evening air, but as he walks away, he realizes he's not thinking about the footwork or the mistakes he made. He's remembering the moment her fingers held his arm, the soft timbre of her laugh, and the way her eyes reflected the rain-streaked window light. The narrator hadn't planned on spending his evenings in a dance studio, yet as the birthday party crept closer, Elena suggested an extra evening session, just to polish the timing. He agreed, telling himself it was purely for practice, though the thought of the quiet studio after hours stirred a flutter of anticipation he didn't quite name. When he arrives that evening, the streets are hushed, most of the nearby shops already shuttered. A lone street lamp throws a circle of amber light over the studio's glass door. Inside, the world feels smaller and warmer. String lights looped along the mirrors glow softly, replacing the usual bright ceiling bulbs, and a single standing lamp near the record player fills the corners with a mellow gold. The narrator notices how different the space feels without the daylight, as though the room itself has drawn closer around them. The outside hum of the city fades, leaving only the muted thump of rainwater dripping from the eaves and the low crackle of a jazz record. Elena greets him with a quiet smile, her voice carrying a warmth that seems softer than before, less formal, as if the night air has loosened something in both of them. She's dressed in a simple slate-gray sweater over her dance leggings, sleeves pushed up to her elbows. They begin with warm-up steps, their reflections moving in near unison in the mirror. Occasionally, their eyes meet in the glass, quick glances that neither holds for too long. The lesson itself is focused. Elena wants him to master a smooth pivot turn that had been troubling him in earlier sessions. At one point, when he struggles to keep his frame steady, she steps in close to adjust his posture. Her palm finds the curve just above his hip bone, guiding him gently into the correct stance. The touch is brief yet unmistakably intimate, not in intention but in its nearness, and he feels the shape of her hands still present even after she moves away. They try the sequence again. This time, as he leads, the movement flows better, a soft glide and turn, the rhythm of their steps matching the slow sway of the music. Their laughter bubbles up when he almost bumps into the mirrored wall, and the sound seems to linger in the lamplit studio longer than it should. When the hour grows late, they decide to call it a night. The air inside has turned faintly cooler, the mirrors slightly fogged at the edges from their movement. Elena hands him a bottle of water, and for a moment they simply stand in companionable silence, catching their breath. Outside, the drizzle has returned. As they reach the studio door, she notices he's forgotten an umbrella. Without hesitation, she presses hers into his hand, a deep navy one with a faint floral print. For a heartbeat, they linger under the doorway's awning, the rain beating on her hair, a faint glint in the lamplight. He's close enough to see the soft curve of her smile, but not close enough to call it more than a glance. There's a stillness between them, not awkward, just heavy with something unnamed. He thanks her, and she nods, wishing him good night. As he steps out into the rain beneath her umbrella, he feels an odd warmth beneath the cool air, not just from the borrowed umbrella or the lessened small success, but from the memory of her hand guiding his steps, the reflection of them moving together in the dim studio, and the quiet certainty that tonight's practice will linger with him long after the rain stops. The night before the birthday party arrives sooner than either of them expects. The narrator enters the studio carrying a mix of nerves and quiet excitement. Tonight is their final rehearsal, the last chance to perfect the routine. The studio feels different again, not quite the cozy glow of the late-night practices, not as formal as the first lessons. A sense of anticipation hums in the space, as if the wooden floor itself is holding its breath. Outside, the evening sky is heavy with clouds, but still dry. The glass panes reflect streaks of twilight blue that stretch across the room like brushstrokes. Elena is already there, running a warm-up on her own. She's dressed simply in a soft black wrap top and fitted practice pants, her hair tied higher tonight, as if preparing for a more serious session. Her posture is elegant yet relaxed, and when she greets him, her smile carries a hint of encouragement, the look of a teacher who's seen her student improve and is proud of it. They begin the routine with focus. The music is richer this evening, a slightly slower instrumental tango that demands closeness and trust in the lead. Their steps are smoother than ever, their bodies remembering the rhythm that once felt foreign. Each turn and pivot flows with fewer stumbles, the connection between them now easier, more natural. As the practice deepens, their proximity grows closer than before, not out of intention but necessity. The dance calls for it. At one point, during a pause after a particularly graceful sequence, Elena steps forward to adjust the collar of his shirt that had folded awkwardly in the movement. The moment is small, almost ordinary, yet it feels charged. Her fingers brush the side of his neck as she smooths the fabric, her touch warm against the cooler evening air. He notices her perfume for the first time, subtle, like fresh bergamot, with something faintly floral beneath. Their eyes meet as she lowers her hand. For a second, neither looks away. The music continues softly in the background, yet it feels as though the world has gone still. Then, with a faint, teasing smile that doesn't quite hide the depth behind it, she leans just close enough for her breath to touch his ear and whispers, "Your dance teacher doesn't touch you like this." The words are gentle, almost playful, but the nearness of her voice makes them feel far more intimate than they sound. The narrator feels his breath catch, not in shock, but in an awareness of the unspoken boundary they're brushing against. There's no sudden move, no dramatic gesture. The tension lives in the silence that follows, in the brief flicker of something unguarded in Elena's eyes before she steps back with a soft laugh, as if to lighten the moment. They continue the rehearsal with careful composure. Though the atmosphere has shifted subtly, the distance between them feels thinner, the pauses more noticeable. When the final song ends, they stand side by side before the mirror, both catching their breath. In the reflection, he sees not just their postures but the quiet understanding of what has passed between them, unsaid, unexplored, yet undeniably present. The session ends without another word about the whisper. As he gathers his things, he senses that something intangible has changed. The dance they've been rehearsing all along no longer feels like just steps and music. It feels like a language neither of them meant to speak, but now both understand. The final rehearsal ends earlier than expected, leaving the evening unusually quiet. The narrator offers to walk Elena part of the way home. To his surprise, she agrees, suggesting instead that they take a detour by the riverfront, saying the cool air would help them unwind after so many long days of practice. The river path is lined with dim street lamps casting soft halos of amber light onto the wet pavement, still glistening from a drizzle that had passed earlier. The low murmur of water against the stone embankment replaces the music they've grown used to hearing in the studio. Elena has wrapped a charcoal gray scarf loosely around her neck, its ends fluttering slightly in the light breeze. As they walk side by side, their shoulders occasionally brush, not enough to seem intentional, but enough that he notices the warmth through his jacket each time it happens. For a while, neither speaks. Their footsteps make a soft, rhythmic sound on the damp walkway. The silence isn't uncomfortable. It feels like an extension of the quiet understanding that's been building between them in the studio. Eventually, Elena breaks the silence. Her voice is calm, but carries a trace of introspection. She talks about how dancing had once been her whole life. The competitions, the early mornings, the relentless drive to be perfect. She describes how she gave up touring in her late 30s to be closer to her family and to open the small studio they now share. There's a moment when she glances toward the river, her expression unreadable except for the slight tightening of her jaw. She admits that although she doesn't regret her choices, there are nights when she feels as though she stepped off the stage too soon, that the music kept going without her. The narrator listens quietly, resisting the urge to fill the silence with reassurances. Instead, he matches her slower pace, letting her words settle between them like ripples in the water. He eventually responds, not with advice, but with an honest confession of his own, how he often feels out of place in crowded rooms, unsure of himself in ways most people don't notice, and how dancing with her has made him feel, if only briefly, like he belongs to the rhythm of something larger than himself. They stop under one of the lamps where the light glints on the damp stone path. A faint breeze lifts a loose strand of Elena's hair, brushing it against her cheek. Without thinking, he gently reaches out to tuck the strand behind her ear, his fingertips brushing the curve of her jaw for the briefest moment. The gesture is small, but feels heavier than words. Elena looks at him then, her gaze softer, deeper. She doesn't step back, but neither does she close the distance. Instead, she thanks him, not for the gesture, but for listening without trying to fix what couldn't be fixed. They resume walking, the conversation quieter now, less guarded. There's an unspoken understanding in the way their steps fall and sink. By the time they reach the corner where their paths part, the night has grown cooler, and a faint mist hovers above the river. Elena pulls her scarf a little tighter and smiles, a gentle, genuine smile that makes the narrator's chest ache with something he doesn't fully name. They say goodnight with a simple nod and a lingering glance. As he watches her walk away, her scarf swaying lightly behind her, he feels the weight of the evening settle over him, the sense that their words had crossed a threshold even if their hands hadn't. In his voiceover reflection, he notes that for the first time since starting the lessons, he isn't thinking about steps or timing or even the party tomorrow. He's thinking about the honesty they shared that night by the river, and how it somehow feels more intimate than any dance they've ever rehearsed. The birthday celebration arrives with the early glow of a spring evening. The narrator arrives at the venue, a warmly lit restaurant with an open terrace, carrying equal parts nervous energy and quiet determination. The low hum of conversation blends with the clinking of glasses. Overhead, strings of soft amber bulbs sway lightly in the breeze, making the entire space feel like a scene suspended between celebration and calm. Elena is already there when he arrives, not in her usual practice clothes, but in a deep navy dress that falls just below her knees, simple and elegant, paired with a shawl that drapes loosely over her shoulders. She doesn't try to stand out. Instead, she blends into the crowd as if content to be a silent witness to the evening. The narrator's girlfriend, radiant and cheerful in her birthday dress, is surrounded by friends and family. She has no idea about the surprise performance he's planned, believing his dance lessons were simply a casual experiment. As the music begins, a familiar instrumental piece they'd practiced countless times, the narrator takes his girlfriend's hand and leads her to the cleared space at the center of the terrace. The warm glow from the string lights casts long shadows across the floor, mirroring their steps as they begin to move in rhythm. The dance unfolds smoother than he could have hoped. The lessons, the late-night practices, every small correction Elena had made, all come together in the effortless sway of their steps and the confident turn of his lead. Applause breaks out even before the final note, and his girlfriend's delighted laughter carries above the music. From the edge of the crowd, Elena claps along with the others, her expression one of genuine pride but touched with a hint of something quieter, an emotion not easily named. She doesn't step forward, staying partly in the shadows where the lights don't reach as brightly. After the dance, as the party livens up with chatter and music, the narrator searches for her. He finds Elena standing outside near the parking lot beneath a lone street lamp, her shawl pulled a little tighter around her shoulders against the night breeze. For a moment, neither speaks. The muffled sounds of celebration drift through the open doorway behind them. Finally, Elena breaks the silence first, her voice warm yet reserved. She tells him he danced beautifully, that the effort he put in showed in every step. He thanks her sincerely, meaning more than just the performance, though he leaves the rest unsaid. Their conversation feels suspended in the quiet space between what they've shared and what they've chosen not to acknowledge. Before leaving, Elena steps closer to hug him. It's a measured, gentle embrace, her cheek resting briefly against his shoulder, her arms looping softly around his back. The contact lasts only a few seconds, but it carries a weight of gratitude, of unspoken understanding. When she steps back, there's a brief, searching glance between them, not of longing, but of recognition, a silent acceptance that this is where their story, for now, must pause. She wishes him good night with a small smile that's both proud and wistful before turning toward her car. The narrator watches her drive away, the red glow of her taillights disappearing down the quiet street. Returning to the party, he feels the warmth of applause and laughter around him, but a part of him remains still, standing by that street lamp in the cool night air, remembering the softness of that last embrace. In his voiceover reflection, he admits he can't tell whether what he feels is loss or gratitude, only that something about that goodbye felt both inevitable and tender. The party winds down past midnight. The narrator helps his girlfriend gather gifts and say goodbye to guests, but as the music fades and the laughter drifts into the cool night air, he notices a strange quiet growing inside him, a stillness that feels out of place amid the lingering celebration. Back at his apartment, the world feels hushed. The kitchen clock ticks in the background, and faint city sounds filter through the half-open window, a distant car horn, the soft hum of late-night traffic, a dog barking somewhere far off. He places his phone on the coffee table, meaning to leave it there, but something compels him to reach for it again. For a long moment, he hesitates, thumb hovering over Elena's name in his contacts. He tells himself it's too late to call, that she's probably asleep. Still, the thought of the way she stood under the street lamp, shawl wrapped around her shoulders, the quiet strength in her smile, it won't leave him. He finally presses the call button. The phone rings twice before her voice comes through, soft and slightly husky with sleep, yet touched with curiosity. "Is everything okay?" she asks gently, not annoyed, as if she somehow expected this call. The narrator laughs under his breath, a little embarrassed. He says he just wanted to thank her, not only for teaching him the steps, but for believing he could do something he didn't think he was capable of. Elena's reply is warm but teasing. "I told you. You had it in you all along. I just nudged you forward." Their conversation unfolds in low, unhurried tones, both speaking as if not to disturb the late hour. The pauses between their words feel like small pockets of calm rather than gaps. They talk briefly about the party, how proud she was watching him lead so confidently. Then the conversation shifts, almost imperceptibly, into something more personal. Elena admits she wasn't sure she should have been there at all, that part of her feared being a shadow in the background of her sister's big night. The narrator reassures her that her presence made the evening feel complete in a way he can't quite explain. There's a gentle silence then, a kind that feels safe. He finally says, in a voice low and sincere, "I hope we dance again someday." For a moment, she doesn't answer. Then her voice softens. "Someday," she echoes. "We'll let the music decide." They exchange quiet goodnights. After the call ends, the narrator keeps the phone resting loosely in his hand for a while, staring at the ceiling as if replaying each word. In his voiceover reflection, he admits that some connections don't need to be defined or rushed. Sometimes they live in small gestures, the press of a guiding hand on your back, the warmth of a late-night phone call, the echo of a whispered phrase you'll never quite forget. The final image returns to the dance studio in the early morning light, empty now, but the string lights still faintly glowing around the mirrors. The camera lingers on the reflection of the polished floor where two sets of footprints once moved in sync. The closing narration is thoughtful, almost like a soft farewell. Not every story ends with a grand confession or a promise. Some just leave you changed, teaching you how to move a little closer, listen a little better, and remember that even one slow dance can stay with you for a lifetime. The screen fades to black with the soft sound of distant music, leaving the audience with a sense of warmth, longing, and quiet closure.